Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part 2, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. We are back with our second half of our discussion on 2013. My name is Dwayne, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing?
I am doing really, really well for someone who just spent the weekend pulling docks and things out of the lake and getting my cabin or camper winterized. So I ache everywhere, but I'm excited to talk Daredevil.
Yes, I guess it is that time of year again, and those of you that aren't living in Arizona, you have to do that sort of thing. So
yes, indeed. It's still pretty nice up here, but it's at the point where we got to get everything ready. So
yeah, because snow could come at any time.
Winter is coming, exactly.
Yes. But yes, to your point, it is our week talking about Daredevil. He had a pretty eventful year, I would say, both in the main Daredevil run, and we're going to look at a limited series called End of Days that I really liked. So there's a lot to talk about.
You're making an audible on this one. This is our first time not actually doing a spotlight from the actual regular universe. We're going into alternate Daredevil, but I'm okay with that because this is a pretty interesting series. So.
It definitely was, and it's not to take away from the main Daredevil run this year, but it was just we'll get into it in the spotlight. But it is unlike anything that I've read with Daredevil in the entire time we've been doing this. It is actually just so different, and so I think we need to highlight it. All right, let's jump in and let's talk about the year for Daredevil. Year in Daredevil.
All right, Dwayne. So, as usual lately, we've got a pretty decent list of appearances, including a number of his own book, a number of times where he's the star, a bunch of guest appearances. What all was Daredevil up to in 2013?
Yeah, though I will say this, it does feel like the number of appearances for Daredevil has gone down a little bit. I mean, Marvel's not putting out, 600 titles a year, so presumably there's going to be a little bit less of Matt Murdock across.
Does make a difference.
400 titles as opposed to 600. But yes, Daredevil's main run is volume 3, issues 20 through 32. And the Daredevil End of Days limited series, the issues 2 through 8. So number 1 was in December of 2012. And so most of the series occurred in 2013. There was also a limited series called Daredevil Dark Knights, the first 5 issues of that. We're actually going to talk about that next week because that ran into 2014. And so we will talk about it as part of our 2014 discussion. Beyond that, he's in Avengers, New Avengers, Secret Avengers, Uncanny Avengers. So all sorts of Avengers titles. Dark Avengers, forgot one, sorry. He was in Winter Soldier. He was in a Deadpool number 11, Indestructible Hulk, issues 9 and 10. He was in the Superior Spider-Man Team Up number 1, and a What If Avengers versus X-Men 1 through 4. So a good number of places you could see Matt Murdock or Daredevil this year. As far as the main Daredevil run for Volume 3, Mark Waid did basically the writing on this, though he got co-credit for writing issue 32 with Chris Samnee. Chris Samnee did a bulk of the artwork this year. He did 20 through 27 and then came back and did 30 through 32. The issues 28 and 29 were done by Javier Rodriguez. As far as inks go, again, Chris Samnee 20 to 27. He came back for issue 32. Alvaro Lopez did issue 28, and then Javier Rodriguez did issues 29 and 30. So a pretty stable, pretty small creative team that covered the main Daredevil run this year. We'll talk about the creative team on End of Days because it is different for End of Days once we get to the spotlight, because there's some pretty big names that I'm excited to talk about there that are different from this main run.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, this was cool. I like the fact that we have, for the most part, a pretty stable group of creators. I think Samnee is not necessarily the fastest artist, and so partly because of that, you end up having some guest appearances, and sometimes they have to just have some fillers or some options to keep him going, because he's been on this for years now, and so there's that whole, if you're doing 20 to 22 pages every month, you get a little bit behind. Eventually, it adds up.
And I was reading a little bit about Chris Samnee, and from what I've read, he likes doing his own inks.
Yep.
As well. And so not only does he have to draw it with pencils, but he also does inks as well. And so between so he's basically doing it kind of twice before handing it off to a colorist in that. So
absolutely,
that extends the amount of work that he has to do, and thus causing, a need to bring in an artist every so often to kind of help cover the gaps, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of the way that he's done that. Now, the one question: who did the inks on number 31?
I did miss that, didn't I?
I was just wondering if it's actually that they did bring in someone to try and help him out on that one because he's falling behind, or if he also did 31 inks. But
I will look. It is Samnee.
Okay. So really, all the books this year that he penciled, he did ink them as well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because man, it is literally in many ways twice the work, because if you really want to do some of the stuff that Samnee does, especially because he's got all those very sort of almost stark monochrome kind of things, and he uses black really, really well, and I can see why he would want to ink himself, but also inking him is not an easy job, and even inking himself not an easy job. So
yeah,
no, but Rodriguez is a cool artist. He has also got kind of that loose, almost sort of comic-y style. It's interesting because in recent years now, he's kind of moved into being more of a colorist than a penciler. But obviously, skilled guy. It's cool that he started here and then he's moved into now doing coloring instead on a lot of stuff.
All right. So as for what happened in these books, so the year kicks off right where we left off at the end of 2012. Daredevil's been captured by the villain named Coyote, who has similar powers to the Spot. In fact, that's who Daredevil thought he was going to end up encountering. But Coyote has literally separated Matt's head from his body, yet he is still alive.
Yes, because all he's done is he's put a spot between his head and his body.
Yes.
So he's technically still connected to his body, but his head's in a different physical location. And so the weird thing is that there's a scene later on where he goes and feeds somebody whose head is in this, and they'll eat it and their body will get the nutrients, even though they're like wherever apart from each other.
Yes,
Weird.
it is really weird. So, as we're saying, still alive, Daredevil learns Coyote's been using portals to smuggle weapons, drugs, and even people for cartels, with his main operation being human trafficking. Ugh. I'm not a big fan of all this. Daredevil eventually escapes. His body, there's a whole thing with his body, like he was handcuffed behind like a pillar. He managed to get unhandcuffed, and his body without his head is like walking around the lair of the Coyote, trying to figure out what's going on and how to undo the thing that that his head is not attached to his body that he's aware of.
Because somehow his radar just works as a part of him, so he can do things. Most people, once they've literally lost their head, are sort of like those chickens running with their heads cut off, right? They can't do much. But because of the fact that he has these powers, he was able to find his way through and save the day.
Yeah. So he's walking around. He finds this control machine that seems to be powering the disembodied heads from the body, for and he shuts it down. And what he also realizes is the real Spot is somehow connected to this machine and may even be powering it, and is also sort of a victim of all this because he's not like in control of himself. He ends up getting loose, the real Spot, and he ends up being this like big monstrous amalgamation thing as a result of this control machine. It is really weird. And so then you have Spot going after the Coyote, you have Daredevil going after the Coyote, and the story ends actually with Spot and Coyote vanishing as like they go into there's a room that he has with all these disembodied heads in it, and they go into this room and it suddenly causes this big explosion, and the two just vanish before, as Matt is trying to learn who it is that's brought the Coyote in to try and go after him. It was a little weird, a little convoluted, and I'm sort of happy that it just kind of ended pretty quickly once we got into this year, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, this was not a story I loved, because it had a bit of a horror kind of feel to it, in that, the whole disembodied heads and kind of the human trafficking and the fact these people were being transported as slaves, and the whole reason for separating their head was so that they wouldn't be able to scream or cause trouble while they're being transported to this new life of sharecropping, slavery, or whatever it is they're being used for. So it's nasty stuff in terms of the content. Of course, Samnee's art and everything is goofy enough and kind of Archie comics enough that it doesn't really have that sort of, it moderates the real creepiness of it.
Right.
But it really just doesn't connect for me. And the weird thing is that in the end, it's sort of like a super graphic, creepy story with Stiltman or something like this in it, right? Because Spot these are not really particularly frightening characters, the villains. They're more goofy, like B-listers. And so I don't know what really connected for me necessarily. And the fact that it kind of came out of the whole thing going back a number of issues, I'm not sure it really hit as well as one would have liked it to.
Yeah. That's why I'm glad we could just move on. Let's move on.
Proceed.
So next we get an appearance by the Superior Spider-Man, who I didn't realize it until we were talking last week, and that Superior Spider-Man is actually Otto Octavius in Peter Parker's body. Now he shows up at the request of Kirsten McDuffie, who is worried about Matt's losing his grip on sanity, and the fact that he's, Daredevil, despite the fact that she keeps asking him and he keeps denying it. She's like, hey, a superhero that is losing, his grip on reality, that might not be the best thing to have happen to New York City.
Yep. And of course, she learns about this because Foggy goes to her and says, I think Matt's losing it because he's keeping his dad's, what was it, his
remains,
dad's,
yeah,
bones and stuff like this in his desk. And
yes.
he says that his ex-wife is appearing in his bedroom when she's locked up in an asylum, many states away, and all the rest of this. And so he's a little worried about him. He goes and tells Matt's girlfriend that he's going crazy, and we'll see how that all works out over the next few years.
Right. Yeah. So those two heroes clash briefly before ending up having to team up to stop none other than Stiltman, who is an upgraded version with, strangely enough, some Doc Ock tech.
Yep. Which frustrates Superior Spider-Man, obviously, because he's like, hey, I recognize these.
Yes.
This is Dr. Octopus's tech.
Right.
So
yes. So afterwards, Spider-Man tells Matt about Kirsten's concerns, leading Matt to reconnect with Foggy, who reveals he may have cancer.
No.
This was by far the most out of left field thing I think I've seen in a long time in a comic book. I was not prepared for Foggy to tell us he has cancer, that he might have cancer.
Again, tonally it's weird because the way that Matt sort of makes it up to him is bringing him like some sort of cheese and Limburger type of cheesecake or something like this. And so he's busy eating this full Limburger cheesecake, and he says, by the way, I have cancer, or I might. And so
I'm sick, and I've been seeing somebody, and we're running some tests.
No. So again, I think that it's interesting because, and this is something that I do love. If you enjoy Silver Age comics at all, this is entirely what they were, is really serious topics put into a form where there's still jokes all the time and things going on, and it never really gets that dark. If you look at if Bendis was writing this, and,
gosh,
you had the remains of his father lost, and Foggy's getting cancer. Oh my God, these books would be so depressing.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Alec Maleev would just paint the pages with sadness, right? He would mix children's tears into his watercolors. But these still just remain kind of, you somehow figure it's all going to be okay.
Right.
It's just the way that it's written, the way that things are going on. It's just like, yeah, okay. There's going to be some drama, But yeah, so that was an interesting issue, that Daredevil's sort of like, Spider-Man's just not right, because they've known each other for a long time.
Yes.
It's like, got anything you want to talk about, man? Because you just don't seem right.
Yeah, you seem off, yeah.
And then, the fact that the on-again, off-again friendship with Foggy and him are back together, so that's good. When you look at the fact it was like 2 or 3 issues ago, where it's like, I never speak to you again, and all of this. So it's just very interesting the way they kind of move back and forth. But it all works.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where maybe doesn't work quite as well as it could, but it works well enough to kind of keep things moving.
I will say that if this, not to spoiler alert, this is going to go about 3 years, right? And I think it's about the right. We needed a break. We needed this for a while, but then it's going to go and we're going to get some more serious stuff. Also, the fact you've got End of Days this year,
yes,
reminds you what Daredevil can be.
Very compare contrast there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we continue, Foggy's diagnosis, Ewing's sarcoma, is confirmed. Matt continues to like be with Foggy at the hospital while also investigating the group that's been hunting him. He knows there's people after him. There's this weird like dinner party fundraiser thing that gets attacked by these like weird, like, I don't want to say zombies, but they were they were people that had gone mad basically and went just ape in a during it like a charity ball thing, and it was so weird.
Well, and you remember why they went crazy?
Well, yes, we do know why they went crazy, and we'll get to that in just a minute.
Because we'd already seen the lab kind of before, hadn't we, or no?
Yeah, there was during these like issue or two, we did see a little bit in there. So, in addition, Nelson and Murdock's law firm gets attacked by a crate full of rabid dogs. Kirsten ends up breaking off things with Matt Murdock after, it was actually weird because Matt Murdock was going to break up with her. He goes to see her at this like gym thing, and she's like on a date with some other guy.
Yes.
And they're doing like rock
Awkward.
climbing. Yes. And she's like, yeah, we're not a thing anymore. And so she breaks up with him before he can actually break up with her, which is actually crazy.
And prompting, of course, the classic Matt Murdock response, I think I'm in love with her. So
right.
as she then is like, we should just be friends. Now he's obviously infatuated and is not going to be able to let it go. So,
and finally, then Matt in Foggy's hospital room is approached by a mysterious man in an orange jumpsuit offering to take him to his enemies, the people that have been out to get him for the better part of the last year in comics, presumably the ones that sent Coyote after him and everything. So of course he's going to follow. And the orange jumpsuit was what those people were wearing at that dinner party ball thing that got attacked. So
seems not at all like a trap to me.
No,
this guy's totally on the up and up.
Totally on the up and up. So it turns out those enemies were all being stoked or led by none other than Bullseye, who is still alive but being kept on life support. And what we find out over the span of basically an entire book is that he's been trying to recreate the accident that gave Daredevil his powers. And so he's been experimenting on people, and that's what ended up causing those crazed people to attack the charity ball in those orange jumpsuit people.
Yep.
So he has had one success. A single enhanced warrior named Akari, who then goes after Matt in battle and nearly kills him, actually. It is almost like an entire issue of those two fighting. And it was a kind of a knockdown, drag out all over the city sort of thing. And ultimately Matt is left beaten and bloodied, and Akari basically says, I'm not going to kill you now, but it's going to come, and it's going to come soon.
Yeah. What do you think of Bullseye returning like this?
This is absolutely nuts. This is
because he's in like this iron lung type of thing. He's in this iron
he
case. All you can see is his eyes and his like anger and the like.
Right.
But so somehow from this he's using his influence and whatever. Where he gets this influence, who knows? It's not like he's rich. It's not like he's ever been some sort of, gang lord or whatever. But somehow he's got like an entire evil scientific army out there creating Matt Murdocks for him. And I don't think this is ever explained properly.
Not
So
in a lot of detail, just sort of broad strokes, and you're just supposed to, I guess, suspend disbelief and be like, okay, sure, yeah,
yeah,
that's obviously a thing that's happening.
because this is going all the way back to Claw, like basically back to the
Yeah.
very beginning of things. He's like, it's all been the plan, you know.
Yep. Yep.
So
All of this orchestrated by Bullseye in this Iron Lung thing.
you know,
So there's a final showdown with Akari and Lady Bullseye, who seems to be also assisting Bullseye in this endeavor. And they're fighting in the lair where he's doing the experiments and everything. And the fight actually ends with the building they're in collapsing and Bullseye's iron lung kind of falling into barrels and barrels and barrels of radioactive material.
mm-hmm.
It is actually sort of crazy, and Daredevil actually saves Bullseye, pulls him out of that iron lung thing he's in, but he is badly burned and blinded from all this radioactive waste that he's come into contact with.
Yes.
It is there's you talk about like some of the art, and there is a panel where you basically see Bullseye's face after this, and it is just this kind of gross looking orangish sort of pussy
Yeah.
thing, and it's really it definitely kind of grossed me out a little bit, actually, if I'm being honest.
I'm sure it'll work out fine for him though. Being dumped in a radioactive goop is actually not as bad for you in the comics as it is in real life, it seems. So
it does sort of seem that way, yes.
50-50 chance it's going to fix everything, and 50-50 chance it will kill you. So there you go.
Right. So next up, Matt reconnects with a childhood bully by the name of Nate Hackett.
So before we go on to that,
okay.
so one thing I wanted to ask you about that I loved from this though is that as it becomes obvious that Bullseye or whoever is playing all of Daredevil's sort of supporting cast against him and is threatening all those people, there's a few panels and pages where you see how all of his friends and all the heroes are essentially each one of them now guarding one of his important people.
Yes.
So, and this will come up when we talk about the end, where you kind of have a Daredevil who's been sort of abandoned. This is not a guy who's all of his friends continue to come to his aid now, and you can see kind of that he's got that community behind him. I also loved the Foggy Nelson story where he's in with the kids in the children's wing.
Yes. There is a short, like 8-page story that is half of, or a small part of one of the books, and he actually goes down and sees like a children's ward and hangs out with them, and they're writing a comic that they're gonna give Iron Man because Iron Man's coming by.
Yep.
And he's sort of asking him questions about that, and saying like, is that really something that you should be doing? And then they're like, dude, it's a comic book, you can do whatever you want.
Yep. I really loved how that sort of looked at how important comics and imagination and that sort of thing, and the kind of the hope and the hero worship that kids can sometimes have for these characters can really take on a positive aspect. And it was cool. It's one of the reasons why these obviously are less realistic comic books than many of the other ones we've read.
Yeah.
A lot of the things in them are kind of goofy, and even things like somebody getting really sick are handled in a way where the plot just sort of seems to get done with quicker than you think. Or even the very basic part of this where essentially Waid starts to run and goes, we're just going to forget about all those bad things that happened and start out again like everybody's kind of just forgiven Daredevil for the ninja things and everything. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of it sort of, you've got to sort of suspend disbelief a little bit. But that's part of the reason why I'm having fun with these, is they do have a very fun, hopeful, just kind of playful feeling to them. That is, I mean, it's just like Daredevil End of Days. I think it's really the same book. That playful happiness we're going to see.
Don't say that.
Don't
That's
don't lie to people.
don't lie to people like that.
No,
No, I agree. For the most part, I think part of the reason I've liked some of these is because they're not. It's not too serious, but it's not also just complete farce.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of straddles that line, and sometimes it goes a bit too far, like the coyote part. But sometimes it there's just some nice cute moments, like Daredevil leading the children through the snowstorm trying to get back after their bus crashes, or Foggy visiting the children's ward in the hospital, and they're showing him the comic book they're making. There's really some nice things, and in fact, there's a fun little story coming up where he teams up with Silver Surfer that I thought was actually kind of cute too as a one shot.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that and there's a lot of skill that's required to be able to do this sort of thing, to be able to straddle that line where you are making something that still can be looked at as a comic that is serious in the modern sense. Where
Uh-huh.
people aren't going to be like, oh, this is just a book for little kids, but that also does maintain that playfulness and gives somebody the ability to have a little bit of the nostalgia for what comics felt like when you were a kid.
Right. Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about the fact that this does feel like more like the Daredevil of the '70s than it does the more recent, Daredevil that we've been reading.
Yeah, and it really to me feels in many ways like some of the almost like Spider-Man, especially of the '60s, or these ones where there's always something crazy going on and all of these relationship problems and there's a disaster of the day, but it all just kind of keeps moving along. It's very quick and snappy, and yeah. But anyways, suspect that probably we've had enough of that. Dwayne, shall we move on? What do you got for us next?
Next up, Matt reconnects with a childhood bully by the name of Nate Hackett, who's now being wrongfully accused because of some former ties that he has to the Son of the Serpents. So Matt helps him fight back in court, and in the process, uncovers a serpent plot that was going to actually try and kill Nate Hackett, which was weird. And there was a bomb that was going to go off as well. Again, there just seems to be just like nothing is ever just a little thing. It ends up being sort of a bigger thing. So there was a judge that was going to kill Nate Hackett. Then there was a bomb in the basement. Matt jumps into the Daredevil costume because he's in there. He's already at the courthouse helping his friend Nate, and he saves the day. Nate Hackett gets shot, but he doesn't die. Building get the bomb goes off, but nobody gets hurt, and everything ends up working out just fine.
Yes, just fine. So, yeah, this was an interesting story. We get some background. We get to see a
Yes.
little bit more of young Matt, kind of, that he was tormented by some of these kids and the like. And this isn't after he loses his sight so much. It's even before. He's got
Right.
all of these bullies who are like, "Hey, come out and play." And his dad says, "No, you don't go out and play. These kids are trouble. Just stay in, hit the books. You're going to do better than me." All of this sort of stuff. I like the fact they didn't make him a good guy. Like
No.
even now, he's not like that reformed bully who suddenly you're like, "Oh man, I'm not angry at him anymore because he's seen the light of he understood." He's still awful, and in fact, he's now almost like, "Man, you ought to thank me. I gave you the Daredevil name, and And I helped
Yes.
you. If you weren't running from me or whatever, you would have never ran into that truck and got blinded. So I don't know if that's quite it, but he did just seem like he was someone that you didn't want to really like.
No.
But Matt helps him anyways because that's who
Yeah.
he is. You know?
It is interesting because he's you you get Matt. The way they set this up was really kind of ingenious because they had, when they're interacting in Matt's office, you get a flashback and you see some of what Nate was doing as a kid to Matt Murdock, and you're like, man, this guy, he kind of sucks. And then
Yep.
Nate starts talking, and you see it from his point of view, and he starts talking about the fact that Matt Murdock was full of himself as a kid, just like he is as an adult, and was sort of like boasting about himself and everything and all this.
Yep.
He's like, not that you deserved being bullied, but you kind of deserved to be bullied a little bit because you were such on a high horse. Somebody needed to knock you down a little bit,
Yeah, he
and you
was
could
that
totally
kid that
believe it.
he deserved to be bullied. And I mean, obviously, his dad is a prize fighter, so it's not like people didn't think he could take it. So it is interesting to see the both sides. Uh, Murdoch is obviously a lot to handle, even in the modern day, right? Only a few people have been able to put up with him for the long term. But yeah, it was intriguing. I don't think, like you say, you can see why. If you're gonna be a bully, Matt Murdock would have been a kid you'd go after. Still doesn't excuse the fact he was a bully, and you still see that
Sure.
he's an awful kid. But
Yes.
yeah, no, you're right.
And I mean, and to your point, he turns out to be an awful adult too. He's like, he's one of those guys that drifts from job to job, and he's doing things he's not supposed to be doing. He ends up with the son of serpents, doing some kind of nefarious things there as well before he finally severs ties because apparently they reached a bridge that was too far for him, and he's just like, nah, man, I'm out. But he's not a good guy now. He's still sort of the. I think of him as the Biff Tannen of the Matt Murdock sphere there because it's
Yep,
very much that guy.
yep. That would be 100% correct. That makes sense. That makes sense.
So late in the year, I mentioned this before, we get a fun one-shot story where Daredevil teams up with the Silver Surfer to stop an alien named Ruach, who pretends to be seeking asylum on Earth, but is actually really there to destroy it. I loved because during that story, Daredevil gets to ride the surfboard, and it
Yes.
is every bit as cool as you would expect it to be.
Yep. And of course, this guy comes first, and he's looking for essentially Murdoch to help him as a lawyer, and then they, you know, the, eventually he gets first off he starts fighting with the surfer, and then the surfer's got to convince him what's going on, and they save the day. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. Where he's like, "Hey, how do I drive this thing?"
Yeah, he's like, while you're here, I would be remiss if I didn't get an opportunity to ride the surfboard.
And Silver Surfer's just standing on the back, completely unimpressed with all of
Right.
this driving, riding around through New York. But yeah, that was fun, and it's kind of that again sort of thing that you cannot see Bendis or Frank Miller really doing this sort of story. They kept
Right.
Daredevil very grounded. The cosmic elements. I mean, really, what? Maybe we had that one story with Mephisto back in the day that kind of got us into some of this because I think the Inhumans came around. But it's very
Right.
seldom that we see any of those characters. So
Right.
yeah, this was interesting. That was cool.
So the year closes with the Jester inciting riots by doxing jurors after a high-profile verdict that he doesn't agree with. Daredevil intervenes, only to discover the Sons of Serpent are the ones pulling the strings. Again, the Sons of the Serpent are involved. With Foggy's help, Matt traces the roots of the Son of the Serpent to the Darkhold, the ancient spell book. And he ends up traveling to Kentucky to meet with a Darkhold expert, Jack Russell. And if that name sounds familiar, that is Werewolf by Night. And he's actually suggested to go there by Doctor Strange, who says he doesn't know as much about the Darkhold as Jack does. So he travels to Kentucky. He gets there, but before he can get any answers, there's a mob that's going after these two so-called monsters, and he tries to help, and he ends up getting shot. And that's actually where the year ends. And this story is going to continue and is actually going to wrap up the 3rd volume of Daredevil next year.
Absolutely. Yep.
It is just the whole arc of this is just sort of crazy. And I did not expect to see the Jester, though we've kind of had some of like the greatest hits of Daredevil, like the villains, sans Kingpin, over the last year or so. So I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise that the Jester would have come out of mothballs and be used as part of this story.
Stiltman and the Jester, the greatest hits of Daredevil. That's what we're calling this? Is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
I
Golden
think it's
oldies.
Golden oldies would be it. I think it's that Waid has dared to simply go, yeah, I'm going to use Stiltman. What are you going to do about it? You know?
Right, exactly.
He's bringing back the characters that basically have been mothballed because they're too goofy in the modern Daredevil sense, and I really have enjoyed it. I think that they've been handled well, and he had the good sense to stick away from Leapfrog so far. So that's really the only miss thus far is a Leapfrog sighting. So
yes.
We'll see. But it is also interesting, the Serpent stuff is essentially the Sons of the Serpent are really almost like a white nationalist type of party or analog, and kind of like an American Nazi Party type of thing. And so Waid is already sort of digging into the political side of things here, and getting started on this idea of trying to look at the fact there are some things in America going on that are a little bit weird. And so it is interesting too that, again, in a very cartoony sort of book, he is nonetheless looking at the fact you've got judges and police and all these other people who are corrupted by this cabal that wants to sort of take over America and have things their way,
Right.
So it's been interesting, and sort of seeing how that gets built up and the like. It's been a good combination this year, I think, of stories that mostly only last 1 or 2 issues, but then also fold into a greater narrative that goes on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've had some that maybe went to about 4 issues, but yeah, most of them I think were 2 or maybe 3 tops.
Mm-hmm. Which in the age of graphic novelization and everything being made for the trade, these are a little bit interesting in that they don't appear to be written for the trade.
Right.
They're written more for individual consumption in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so that is the main Daredevil run for this year. The other big story that ran for the first half of this year is called Daredevil End of Days. Now, this 8-part limited series has some of my favorite Daredevil creators on it, and it was absolutely amazing, if not completely different in tone and tenor than the main Daredevil run, and therefore I think it deserves our full attention from this week's Spotlight. This week's Spotlight story.
All right, Dwayne. So, you had a bunch of different options this year as far as what you were going to choose for the Spotlight, and you've chosen for us the most difficult of paths. An 8-part, multi-creator epic that has all sorts of storylines, a bunch of stuff we've never seen before, and a completely new chronology that all has to be explained.
Yeah,
we're going to have to get to this. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, this is Daredevil End of Days. It started in December 2012 with part 1, and it goes through Daredevil number 8 in August of 2013. And first off, I've mentioned the creators. This is Brian Michael Bendis and David Mack. And the art is by David Mack and Klaus Janson. And we had some finishing art from Bill Sienkiewicz. So these are quite possibly some of my favorite creators that have ever been on Daredevil. And Bill Sienkiewicz, who we both love from Moon Knight.
Yep.
And I was so surprised when I first opened the first book and saw that these were the creators behind this, that I just immediately dived in and just went at this book. And this is not volume 3. This is a dark story, actually, a very dark story.
Yeah, I mean, it begins with the death of Daredevil.
Yes. It does.
It's actually should be called After the End of Days, right? Because and it's extremely dark, it's extremely moody, it's extremely Bendis. There's no question about that. But when you look at it, yeah, you've got Bendis and Mack as two of the premier Daredevil creators of the 21st century. Alex Maleev did a lot of the color art, and also I think did a few things on the a lot of the cover art and a few things inside. You've got Klaus Janson, who of course did not only the finishes for a lot of Frank Miller's stuff in the 80s, but then also had a significant run as the penciler of Daredevil himself.
Right.
And so his art really gives you kind of that stamp of 1980s authenticity to the book.
Yep.
Bill Sienkiewicz is not necessarily somebody who's ever done Daredevil, but he is probably like a definitive artist for Elektra, because a lot of the stuff he did in the 90s with like Elektra Assassin and stuff like this, when you look at kind of in my mind's eye, when I see a picture of Elektra, it's a Bill Sienkiewicz painting of her with this massive gun, right? That's Elektra. And so the fact that he's in on this, I think also he's got a very strong connection to the Daredevil world. David Mack, also is doing variant covers and the like. This is
he's got painted art throughout inside these books too, as well. And it was great. And to your point, I mean, it starts with Daredevil dying.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
bring it on, Dwayne.
Yes. So let's as End of Days begins, we see Daredevil and Matt Murdock dying in a final confrontation with Bullseye, who kills him after a very brutal fight. With his dying breath, Murdock utters one last word: Mapone. This whole story then follows journalist Ben Urich, who sets out to uncover the meaning behind Daredevil's final message while chronicling the end of Daredevil's era for the Daily Bugle that seems to be on the cusp of folding in its own right.
Mm-hmm. This is very much Citizen Murdock, right? It follows Citizen Kane almost exactly. You've got this journalist who is sent after the death of this important figure to find out not only what happened in their story, but what is the importance of this mysterious final word. They even reference, what was it, his sled, right? That the final word that Daredevil says to Bullseye as he dies.
Yes.
As Bullseye murders him.
And the other thing that I didn't mention throughout all this is when you see this final confrontation, there are witnesses, and it is in Hell's Kitchen, and there are people watching it, there are people recording it, and nobody's helping or nobody's doing anything besides just watching these two fight and ultimately seeing Bullseye kill Daredevil. It is weird, but at the same time, it sort of feels like Yeah, that's sort of kind of how this would happen if this happened in real life. If I'm being perfectly honest, and it seems kind of rough.
How
If
many
I'm being
Daredevil comics have you read?
hundreds at this point.
If Bullseye was in the midst of like a rampage in the middle of your city, would you attempt to help?
No, I guess not. I
I
guess
mean,
not.
there
That
is
is
the
true.
fact that he's a murdering machine.
Yes,
Normal
that is
people
true.
just end up dead
But
because he
I mean,
gets
just the
angry
whole
with
thing of there were several
yes,
panels where you just see people there just watching, and they're like mouth open, and then other people with like their camera phones recording this and all that. It just sort of like my wife and I were kind of tangentially in an auto accident a few months ago, and like there were some people that were helping, and then there were other people on their just standing there, and then there were other people standing there with their phones recording, and it just sort of was like it reminded me of that actually, and it just sort of felt weird and sort of but also sort of on the nose, I guess, for what that would be like in real life.
yeah, yeah. Anybody who's not running like hell in the other direction though does not understand who Bullseye actually is.
Right.
They should be scattering at that point.
They should. Yes.
But yeah,
So
so
as oh, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to continue. So
Yep, that's fine.
right. So as Yurik's investigation goes, it's revealed that years earlier, Daredevil's crusade against crime took a darker turn when he publicly killed Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, claiming that he had no other choice. And since then, Murdock had become increasingly isolated as well as very violent. We see Yurik interviewing several of let me sorry. Yurik, we see Yurik interviewing several acquaintances or like other superheroes from Matt Murdock's past, including Elektra, Typhoid Mary, and Maya Lopez, all of whom deny knowing anything about what Mapone actually is. But
Which is
also
that
during
final word.
yeah, that final word. But also during those visits, we learn that all these women have children who there seems to be some resemblance to Matt Murdock.
A lot of
in the
red hair
process.
going on, which, as we know, is not a genetically dominant thing in the regular part of the population. So there might be
Yes,
something going on there.
right.
Yeah, I think there's at least over the course of the book probably 4 or 5 different women who have kids running around that are little redheads, mostly boys. In fact,
Yeah,
almost all of them. So
yeah,
yeah, so kind of interesting. Also interesting to see that for many of them, the future is better. Like in this one, Milla is not a lunatic. She's not murdering everybody. So somehow she got better. Um, it's kind of cool that not everything is dark. Most things are dark in this future, but not everything.
yeah. Yeah, Electra's watching her son at a soccer game and is like, I don't want to get involved. Don't look for me ever again.
Mhm.
Typhoid Mary's back. She is back to having this sort of single dominant, you know, identity that is more under control. That she doesn't have
Mhm.
some of the things that the typhoid personality sort of brought out in her. And like,
Bendis still does not seem to understand writing DID, by the way.
no,
But nonetheless, but
yes,
it is one of those where that is the story though, is that essentially they somehow broke her multiple people from her altars and brought everything together into one, or forced one of them or the rest of them down. But now she's like a television actress. It seems like
yeah,
a soap actress. So
yes.
yeah,
But and then it was interesting because Maya Lopez is like she was like a superhero, and then like as Echo, and then sort of like in dealing with sort of the post Wilson Fisk death, saw what it was doing to Matt Murdock and sort of got out of being the superhero and was like college professor or something.
Yeah. Did you see the weird little trivia there, by the way? I haven't checked. I think this is the only time it's ever been referred to. But there was a point at which she's talking about life and death, and she's like, yeah, after you've been resurrected by the hand or whatever, there's never been any reason given for how Maya Lopez returned from being killed by Count Nefaria in those Moon Knight stories that we read.
Okay.
Bendis in this book for the first time is like, well, she had to come back somehow, evidently. So he's now written the story as the hand brought her back. But I don't know that in the regular 616 there's ever been any explanation, other than people just didn't want to deal with Bendis's Moon Knight run, and everyone tried to forget that it ever happened. So, kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed seeing all of those characters. The other thing, when you're reading in Marvel Unlimited, have you ever noticed Bendis stories can be very difficult to read digitally?
It wasn't too bad, but yeah, it's a little more complicated than normal.
Because he does a lot of double page spreads where things go all the way across 2 pages, and so you're like having to either turn the thing sideways and zoom, or go into panel by panel mode or whatever. But it's really easy to tell when like Bendis and Mack get together, because the way that a lot of these, and really it's mostly just Bendis, because he does this in a lot of his books. He likes to write these double page spreads. Kind of drive me crazy. But
Yes.
there you go.
All right, so next, as the story continues, we see Bullseye, and actually we see a dead Bullseye as he's found in this seedy apartment or hotel room that's all sorts of messed up, along with the word Mapone written in his own blood on the wall. Eric realizes the assassin took his own life after going on to the crime scene, and he thinks it's maybe some lingering guilt around Murdock's death. Eric continues his search, and that brings him into contact with the Punisher, who is in prison currently, who suggests he knows what the word Mapone means, but won't actually share with Yurik what it is. And in fact, ultimately uses Yurik's visit to escape prison and go targeting some of Daredevil's former enemies, including the Owl and the Purple Man. And we actually see him execute those two over the course of the rest of the story. So
Yep.
this is really, really interesting stuff. I didn't have Frank Castle as being the guy who would know what this word meant, but it totally makes sense that, he would use an opportunity to potentially say that he's got information to leverage a visit and then use it to escape and then go after people.
Yeah, he also makes it implied that evidently Daredevil put him in jail, but that he had essentially worked with him on it because he was like, yep, we knew that's where I needed to be. So he's evidently just been causing havoc within the prison system for 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And has now decided it's time to go out and cause havoc in the outside world. It's interesting. I don't really understand how the whole Punisher death scene works, by the way. I get that he did it, that essentially he ricocheted a bullet like 12 times around the room right into his own head.
Yeah.
So at that point, once he saw that, Eric's like, well, okay, yep, that would be the way he'd do it. He's going to do it. So he gets that he did actually kill himself, and he had some woman there dressed up as Elektra who he was torturing, and then suddenly, there's this thing that's driven him crazy enough that he decides to off himself after theoretically, doing the thing he's been trying to forever and killing Daredevil. So,
right.
And then we're also seeing things like Nick Fury coming out of hiding. I think that's already been in book 2 or something like that. We saw that. He also won't tell anything. He's like, nope, sorry, you don't need to know.
Yeah, so one of the first people that Ben Urich goes to or tries to get in contact with, he starts looking for the Black Widow and starts asking around about her because he's trying to, because he's meeting with Elektra and Maya Lopez and that. And basically, Nick Fury comes out of hiding and is like, listen, stop looking for Black Widow. She's actually dead. She's been dead for several years. She's not going to be able to help you with whatever it is you're looking for. And he's like, okay, well, do you know what Mapone is? And he's like, no, I have no idea. And it just sort of moves on from there. But yeah, it's interesting because like it's everybody that was kind of in his circle and even kind of on the edge of his circle, because we had Matt Murdock interact with Nick Fury a few times, especially like when his secret got outed. Yep. and Murdock would never take Nick Fury up on his offer to like, you know, come work Shield. Yep. Yeah, join up with Shield and we'll help you in that. And so,
yeah, I love the way that these two draw him. By the way, there's something about Klaus Johnson's work has never looked better than it does here. Now,
it does look great.
Bill Sienkiewicz is an actual genius, so it shouldn't surprise anyone that having him ink you does you favors. But the combination of the two of them really works well, because Janson is fantastic as a stylist. Like his ability to compose a page in life. In many ways, I think that he's the reason why Frank Miller looked so good for so long, is Miller would sort of design a page, and then Janson would finish it and make it all flow and make it all work. So a lot of those were things he was working on. It's interesting to me, too, how a lot of these... There's a guy named Howard Chaykin who has done a bunch of stuff over the last 30-some years. The combination of Janson and Sienkiewicz looks an awful lot like Howard Chaykin to me, which is kind of weird, but also fantastic. It's a really cool art style, and it looks really good. So I'm enjoying these. I'm enjoying seeing some of these characters. You know, they're aged versions of them, but seeing some of these characters kind of in a way that I never really have before. This is an art style that it evokes other things, but it's its own thing. It's really cool.
Yes. So after all this, Yurik is finally starting to, what he believes is, close in on the truth of what this word means and everything that's sort of happened. But as it stands, he ends up getting attacked by ninjas of the hand. And during that process, we actually see a new Daredevil. And we've been seeing kind of, as this investigation has gone on, we've seen glimpses of this Daredevil that's been sort of following him and watching him and sort of ensuring that he's going to be okay. And during this fight, during this attack by these ninjas, Ben Urich actually ends up getting killed. And this Daredevil comes and like kind of cradles Ben Urich in his arms and then takes off his mask, and it is his adopted son, Tim Lang, who we end up finding out over the course of like the next entire issue, is that he's been secretly being trained by Murdock to succeed him as the next Daredevil.
Yep.
It is. Exactly. And a lot of that actually was artwork that I think was David Mack, because it was all watercolor and really, really, really good looking, and just it was quite something. And it was more of, we didn't see any of sort of kind of the fighting, but we learned, we saw a lot of them like talking and him sort of trying to impart wisdom on Tim and that, and he's like, and what's interesting is he's like saying at some point you're going to need to find your stick, your sort of mentor. And Tim's like, well, isn't that you? I mean, you're the one that's sort of teaching me all this. And he's like, no, there's going to be somebody else that's going to be important and be a critical part of kind of you becoming Daredevil. And so now that now that Ben Urich is dead, Tim is very distraught, but he's like, now I think more than ever decided that he's going to take on that mantle of Daredevil.
Yep.
So we move on to the final book, and we see actually Ben Urich's funeral. And after the funeral, Tim is actually approached by Nick Fury, who offers him a file explaining Mapone. Like, he's like, I should have given this to Ben,
Yep.
but I didn't. I feel a little bad about it now, especially since he died. But here's this information that he was asking for. But Tim actually destroys it without ever actually reading it. Throws it in a dumpster, sets it on fire, and he ends up going to a bar. And there he meets a blind, red-haired young woman who reveals herself to be Mapone Romanoff, the daughter of Matt Murdock and Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. She tells Tim as they're walking out, there's a big bar fight. She ends up, she's hustling some guys at the bar playing pool. They get upset because she's hustling him. Tim tries to intercede as Daredevil. She basically wipes the floor with all of them. And then they walk out of the bar together. She tells Tim that most people call her Stick, signaling the continuation of Daredevil's legacy Matt shared with Tim during their training.
Yep.
So we get that total final closure. We know what Mapone is, and we actually see there is a panel where we see what the contents of that envelope was that Nick Fury gave to Tim, and that he doesn't see, but basically it's a photo of Matt Murdock, Natasha Romanoff, and then a young girl. So we know that, yeah, this is Mapone.
Which, just as a note, is exactly the ending of Citizen Kane. As you see the sled thrown onto the fire at the very end, and as the flames lick around it, it zooms in, and you can just see that, the word. I won't give it away for the people who haven't seen it in 150 years or whatever, but this is 100%.
I've never actually seen Citizen Kane, so
okay, so I'm not going to give it away. Forget I ever said sled.
It's fine.
Completely irrelevant to the movie. Had nothing
yes.
to do with it. But yeah, so this is 100% a retelling of Citizen Kane. It's also weird. I don't know if it means anything or why. I also know it's not a typo because Bendis knows better than this, for Christ's sakes. Her name is Mapone Romanova.
Yeah, I guess that is true. Yeah.
Which is not Romanoff.
No.
So, for whatever reason, either Natasha changed her name or it's just verifying for us that this is a different universe. So on this final panel, even as we get this idea that, we've got closure and we know what happens to Daredevil and all of his cronies, we also get this little kick that says, oh, by the way, this wasn't a real story.
Yeah.
This happened in some other universe where Natasha's name is Romanova.
Sure. Yeah.
So what did you think of the ending? What did you think of the reveal?
So I spoiled it for myself, and I mentioned this to you because, my assumption was Mapone was, I don't know what it was. I thought maybe it was just a word I didn't know, as opposed to it being somebody's name or something. So I actually Google searched the word Mapone, and the AI response to it actually gave away the fact that it was the daughter of Matt Murdock and Natasha. And so I knew before I got to the end that was how it ended, but it was still, I really liked it. And yes, I haven't seen Citizen Kane, so I didn't have that reference either, but it was, it felt right, I guess, based on the story that they had told. And it sort of was a nice, comforting ending to a rather dark and very gritty and violent story that we got.
So the thing that does get me, why did the word Mapone make Bullseye kill himself?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you.
I don't have any idea how saying his daughter's name as he's being murdered would make Bullseye somehow decide to off himself. Either Bullseye knew what it was, or else, kind of like you're just saying, if you don't know what Mapone is, you'll try to Google it or whatever. You're not going to shoot yourself because you didn't know the word.
So here's the thing: is they sort of intimated that Bullseye didn't basically kill Daredevil, Matt Murdock, until he said that word, and then he sort of like finished him. Right? He might have let him live otherwise, and then he said that, and then he killed him. And so then like, if you think about it that way, then it makes a little bit difference that he's then thinking about that word. Like, he obviously has some sort of visceral reaction to that word, and then if that is sitting in your head and you just can't get it out, then maybe you off yourself as a result of it.
I guess so. Yeah, it's weird though, because that you would Google, but it's sort of like the first time I watched Godfather, I did not know what a cannoli was. So when they're like, leave the gun, take the cannolis, I'm like, what in the world is that? So I went and looked it up. I guess there are just words you don't, and I guess Mapone and cannoli are kind of similar in that way. And it's a weird, obviously it's a weird word that isn't a real name or anything. They kind of just made up something that could be the MacGuffin like that.
Right.
So outside of the story, what did you think of the covers for these 8 books? Did you notice the covers of them?
I mean, I didn't spend a ton of time looking at the covers, but like I think they looked really.
They're fantastic. They're
Yeah,
mostly, I think, by either Mapp or Maleev. But the first one is the death of Daredevil. The second one shows Wilson Fisk with a bullet in his head. The third one, you've got Elektra being hung or being found dead, hanging. The fourth one, you've got Bullseye laying dead with cards around him. Fifth one is the Punisher, dead in his van. Sixth one is Natasha, dead in a bathtub. Seventh one is, what's her name? The one with the altar. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Mary.
Seventh one is Typhoid Mary in sort of a body bag. And then the eighth one is the new Daredevil standing there in kind of just a bright white cover.
I guess I didn't remember that it was basically death shots as the covers.
Every one of them is essentially a cover of a dead superhero or supervillain until you get to the final one where you have the rise of the new Daredevil, which is macabre to say the least. But they're very, very impactful covers.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a tough series to read sometimes, but it was also really well done. It's also another one that, again, it's not a Daredevil story. The hero of this story is Ben Urich. He's 100% the protagonist, And so it's a journalism story about someone who just can't give up on the story, and eventually they end up dead.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it tracks that I really liked it because, like, I really liked the Civil War frontline books that basically it's following him as well, and it's just I think those are really interesting ways to tell a superhero story, and so they tend to resonate with me.
Yep, no, I would agree, and it's a dark future. It's a dark future also in that for some reason Sam Wilson is now either the president or the vice president, and it looks like he's now teamed with Norman Osborn.
Yeah,
and things are seeming that they're getting a little bit unpleasant there. The Daily Bugle is folding. Everything's kind of coming to an end. And I don't know if we're supposed to take that sort of the new Daredevil's going to rejuvenate a lot of that or whatever, but it seems like a drop in the bucket for this particular future. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes. The story overall, though, man, was that well done.
Yeah, really I mean, I found myself I went through it like really fast. Like it wasn't a dense read, but it was visually interesting, so I did spend time. Usually I would read the page and then I would take a moment and just sort of look at the page
Hmm.
and just, but I went book to book to book. I basically read it in two sittings. I read 4 books in one sitting and then 4 books in the next sitting. And like, I didn't really want to stop, but I
Yeah.
just sort of ran out of time after the first 4. So
Yeah. It's propulsive, but it does take a long time. To me, there's a lot of words on the page. There's a lot of panels, and
yeah, there were
there's
a lot of panels.
just
Yeah.
a lot of pretty things to look at as you're going along.
Yeah.
So
But would highly recommend it. Like
yep.
I think that's a really really good story, and if you're looking for a good Daredevil story, even if he isn't, you know, like like you said, it's Ben Ure kind of telling the story, but it's still a Daredevil story.
But he is there because
Yes.
evidently, like Genghis Khan, like 70% of the population of New York will eventually be descended from Matt Murdock, from what we're seeing. So
It would seem.
it'll be an entire redhead population. It'll be like Ireland within a few generations after Murdoch has made his way through the town. So, all
Dan,
right.
we're running a little long. Should we jump into the rapid fire questions real quick?
Are we running long or are we running normal, Dwayne? Because if we run long every
So,
week, it
yes, I
seems
suppose that is
it
true.
seems
That is true.
disingenuous of you to say this every week because it's just
Okay, we're
it's just
running a
what it
little
is.
longer than normal, then
All
I
right,
guess is what I'm saying.
all right. So first off, who is Matt Murdock in love with this year?
So at the start of the year, it's Kirsten, but he eventually tries to break up with her, only to have her break up with him first. And then we didn't really see any sort of love interest beyond the fact that he's like, well, now I'm interested in her again now that she broke up with me.
I think she is the love interest of the year, at least for now. Uh,
Right.
who's the biggest villain of the year?
So it turns out to be somebody I did not expect in Bullseye
Yep.
because he was supposed to be dead based on the big crossover, the big event a couple years ago when he basically got killed at the top of a building uh, when he was running the hand. But yeah, he seemed Bullseye was behind many of the bad things that have happened to Matt during Volume 3. So he
There you
definitely
go.
was the big bad villain this year.
How about did we see Matt practicing any law this year?
He is still doing the lawyer mentoring that he was doing rather than actually being a courtroom lawyer this year.
I don't think we saw anything at all for Portland Law. Does anyone know Matt's identity, or anyone new know Matt's identity?
No, no, this
No,
is that worst kept open secret.
it's just old hat at this point. There's
Yeah.
to the point that, in fact, not only can't he be a lawyer because of the fact that everybody knows, but Kristen McDuffie can't even get anyone to take her seriously now because she was dating Daredevil, and so she's lost all credibility. So
Yes.
yeah, it's just a mess. How about is Daredevil a good guy this year?
So I said yes, I think so, because Matt actually was a better friend to Foggy this year than I think he's been in many years. Like the fact that he was like sitting in the hospital room despite the fact he was like getting sick because of the smell and
Yep,
stuff. He actually was there for Foggy for like the first time
yep.
ever, it felt like. So
He
yeah, I think he was a good guy this year.
bought him the Limburger cheesecake, which for somebody with enhanced senses had to have been about the most
That
difficult
was
thing he could do. So
yeah,
there you
exactly.
go. How about did we learn anything new about Matt's past?
You skipped the equipment question.
Oh, how about Daredevil's outfit, equipment, that sort of thing? Anything changed this year?
So nothing new for Daredevil, though it is interesting because Akari's outfit was really interesting because it was essentially the first yellow and red Daredevil costume that we saw way back at the very beginning of Volume 1. And like it was supposedly like part of Jack Murdoch's boxing robe and that sort of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously on the Akari, there was some different like symbols on the front of it. rather than the
Yep.
double D. But it looked very much like Daredevil, yellow and red.
Kind of a combination of Daredevil and Bullseye. And Bullseye loves Daredevil's costume. He likes wearing it. He likes other people working for him.
Yeah.
He just wants to be Daredevil. That's what he really wants. We learn anything new about Matt's past?
We did see some glimpses of Matt's past. He was talking with Stick during his fight with Akari. We saw a flashback there during issue 25. And then obviously, when we saw the issue 27 with Nate Hackett, we got to see how Matt was as a child, all getting bullied and then, boasting about how great he is to his classmates.
Yep. And biggest moment of the year.
So the biggest moment or most memorable moment for me this year was Foggy getting diagnosed with cancer. And I just did not expect that to be a thing to ever happen. And so to me, that just kind of dwarfed everything else.
Yeah, that was something that kind of changed the course of the year. There were a lot of things that actually could have been big reveals and big moments and the like, but most of them got sort of just downplayed into being entertaining more than being really crazy. So I think that, Foggy and him sitting there with that discussion probably ends up being probably the most important moment. I would second that.
All right, Dan, that I think wraps up our discussion about Daredevil this year. It was a big year. I'm really interested in seeing how 2014 goes, and then this other limited series that we're going to talk about, Dark Knights. So, but before we wrap up, we still have one more piece of business. Let's get to the takeaway. This week's takeaway. All right, Dan, it was a big year. 2013, if you were to wrap it up, sum it up, what should be the takeaway for 2013?
I want to go with something that I think is a little different than what I've been doing the last few years. I've been doom and gloom man in my takeaways. I'm going to say this year the takeaway is sometimes comics can be pretty awesome, because this was a fantastic year of comic books for the entire industry. It was fantastic in terms of the fact that from a financial health standpoint, comics sold really well. You had all sorts of publishers that were making their way into the charts. We saw for the first time over a third of all comics sold were not Marvel or DC, so some of these mid-tier publishers were really starting to take hold a little bit. Outside of Daredevil, there were all sorts of just amazing comic books of all sorts. You can look for Snyder and Capullo's Batman. You can look for stuff like East of West coming out. You can look for Lazarus or Battling Boy or Black Science. Boxers and Saints, if you want something that's got kind of a history take and the like. The Catal series, the Manhattan Project. So many just absolutely brilliant comic books started up this year. And there was also a lot of really good stuff that was still continuing. Both Marvel and DC have realized that they have a problem with the fact that their populations of fans and readers are aging. So they're trying to shake up their universes to get new things, new stories, new readers. And then you look at something like Daredevil, which I think just personifies the fact that you've got this single character who in 1 year has two absolutely diametrically different series going on.
Yes.
Both of which are really excellent, and both of which fit a really solid niche, both for established fans and for new people. Now, I would say End of Days. Most of what that has for people who are newer to comics is just the brilliant art. It's a fantastic looking thing. You're going to be really confused if you come into that and have not read a bunch of Daredevil, because they don't explain any of what's going on.
Yeah, no.
Right? But it's just a year when, as I look around, you see the movies out there like Wolverine, Man of Steel, and Red 2. So some of them that are superheroes, some that aren't, making money. You can say how, maybe they're not the greatest, maybe they are the greatest, but people were going to the movies. Obviously, Marvel's after Avengers and ramping up on the Infinity War. We're going to have cool stuff coming out next year as well. This is just a really, really solid time to be a fan. Things are good. It looks like we are moving into a future where everything's going to be great, and it's pretty cool. 2013 is a year to celebrate.
Yeah, this seems like a really good year to just kind of hold up as an example of this is what comics can be at when they're at their best.
Yep, pretty fantastic.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see what that then means for next year, because like it feels like it's one of those scenarios where you it should be able to continue. It should be able to, but it's not easy to continue that kind of run of really great stuff.
So I've not done all of my research for next year and the year after yet, but I'm suspecting 2014 is going to continue to be pretty amazing. And 2015, things are going to start to hit the fan. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I mostly say this just because anytime you make Captain America a Nazi, bad things happen. And I remember 2015 as being a tough year as a comic fan. So we're going to see how exactly all that goes.
All right. But that is a discussion for another time. For now, we're going to wrap things up for this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help other new listeners find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. Did you read Daredevil End of Days? What did you think? We'd love to get your thoughts. You can send us those via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com, or you can reach out to us on social media on Blue Sky. We are at Comics Overtime there. Dan, it was a big year. I don't know how you follow up that, but we've got 2 weeks to talk about it here. The next couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to it.
Bring it on.
Until next week, take care, everybody.
See you later, folks.